Against Whom, and was published in 2010, and you can get this book on Amazon or in many other locations. Detlef, Antje, thank you for coming.
Hello, is it on? Is it on?
Yeah.
More or less, okay. So good evening, and thanks for the Ryerson Centre to have us here. I will start to briefly explain this project. As said, it started in 2011. Of course, there was already a lot of thinking about it in 2010, mainly for two reasons. Harun had a professorship at the Art Academy in Vienna, and he retired, and that meant that we had much more flexibility and time and space for other projects, because that was over after 7 years. And we always wanted to, we always had a kind of dream to work together internationally on this continent. And Harun got all the time these invitations to present a film, to give a talk, to conduct a workshop, whatsoever. And sometimes it was really tiring to do it bit by bit. And we thought we should connect it. If these invitations come, we should say, yes, but we want to do something. And so Harun once already did this project, of course, in another frame, and in Vienna at the Academy. He also called it Labor in a Single Shot. And this was one of the most interesting projects for him. So he thought we should elaborate on this one. And that's what we did in the last 3-4 years. Yeah, maybe Detlef can explain a little bit about the rules.
Yeah, the first time I met Antje and Harun was in 2002. I worked in Jakarta in Indonesia, and it was a time of transformation from a military society to a civil society, from an autocratic regime to a democratic society, from completely controlled media to free press, free art, free expression. And we looked for great workshop leaders. And one of them whom I invited in 2002 was Harun. And since that time, I knew that he is actually one of the best video teachers I ever met. And at the time, Antje was just accompanying him, and both were there. And it was then again in 2010 that I met both again. Harun had a professorship in Harvard, a guest professorship, and Antje curated an exhibition in Harvard. And during this time we had a lot of exchange. What makes the world change and what makes the world move? And we thought workshops are the very best format. And so the idea of making a workshop series all over the world in 15 countries called Labor in a Single Shot was condensed, focused on 3 rules. So 15 countries, 15 workshop groups, but all have to work according to the same rules. Rule number 1, the short films they are doing have not to be longer than 2 minutes. 2 minutes and basta. Rule number 2, it has to be about labor. Rule number 3, no cut is allowed. It has to be one single shot. So first you might ask, why about labor and not about free time or children or whatever? And I just think of a film of Harun. It's called Laborers Are Leaving the Factory. He made it in '95, and within that film, at one moment he says, our life consists to 95% of work, maybe 90%, and to 5 to 10% of free time. But the films, as we know them, consist on 90% of free time and 10% of work. And we will make a project which turns this ratio around. So this was the moment where labor in a single shot was born.
Yeah, as you can see here, projected, we also have a web catalog. If you would like to find it, it's always a British spelling. It's a bit odd for Americans or Canadians, I guess. The thing is that it's very important to have this because the rule here is that we include every film that was produced in a way that it is a finished piece. So this is not curated at all, but this is the kind of democratic gesture towards all the participants. I think in total we had more than 400 participants that everybody can have it published in this. This is a kind of archive now, of course. And as you can see, it's structured. This is probably the most interesting, the workshops and then the workshop cities. And we have always these nice city logos. They were done by the artists Alice Kreischer and Andreas Siegmann. Oh, here. And here you have all the films, in this case, for example, from Bangalore, and also statistical data about the city in question. And we will use this web catalog now for the presentation of the project. Apart from the web catalog, it was two things. During the workshops, we already started, I think after 7 workshops, we already started a series of exhibitions. And these exhibitions kind of grew with the ongoing workshop project. The exhibitions grew bigger, sometimes not. It's not a straight line there of progress also. Right now we have the exhibition of the entire 15 cities in Boston at the Mills Gallery, and it used to be at the Folkwang Museum in Essen, and next year, end of February, we will have it at the House of the World Cultures in Berlin. You wanted to say something about the globalized world and selection?
Yeah, a question was, okay, workshops in 15 countries, 15 cities, which should these countries, how do we select the countries? And criteria were, it should be 5 continents at least, so North America, South America, Asia, Africa, Europe. It should be industrialized countries and areas and agricultural remote areas. It should reflect the world as it is, because labor today is a globalized, it takes place in a globalized world, and each labor, wherever it takes place, has to be seen in that global context. And this should be reflected within the basic structure of the project. So this is why these 15 cities came together. Of course, there were also other aspects. This is that we needed people and institutions in the local situation. We needed not only the Goethe Institutes, but also film schools, museums, institutions. So the great network of the Harun Farocki film production was combined with our modest Goethe Institute network, and both together created these possibilities.
Now we start with showing you some examples. With the starting point, yes. So, okay, probably you all know the film. It's the Lumière film, Workers Leaving the Factory. It's supposed to be the first film that was publicly shown. So it's not the first film in film history, but the first that was publicly shown. And it shows workers leaving the Lumière factory. What's first astonishing is you have no corporation, no sign, nothing that tells you what it is. You have just the framing of these two exits where workers pour out, and the workers obviously wear Sunday clothes. So right at the beginning, you have the connection to the world of work, but in a very staged way, and also in a very satisfying way, because you have a beginning and a middle and an end. What's this connection lost thing? That's strange. So it's very satisfying to watch because of the structure that the images fills itself with the workers pouring out of the factory, and in the end the door closes and that's it. So there's already a little dramaturgy in this very, very early film. And for us, the interesting thing to come back to the early film is maybe something as a counter gesture to what's happening right now with video. Because with video, first of all, it doesn't cost anything. Second, you can cut and do and try as much as you wish all the time, and that leads, in our perspective, to a kind of loss of intensity, and also a kind of loss of the rigidness of decisions to do, because if in those days the cameras were very, very heavy, that it was not so easy to move, to pan, so you have basically these static shots, and the length of the film is 45 seconds just because one film roll was, the duration of one film roll defined the length of the film. So this is kind of interesting restriction already, that every second costs in those days, and it was not so easy to move. So we thought if we work with students, but also established artists, but we're not only students, and if we say, try to use video as if it is film, then you come back to really interest, like every framing, everything counts. Like there's no element in this 2-minute videos we did, idealiter, of course, nothing that doesn't count, everything counts. And I have to say, we did this in 15 cities, and it's true, it was never boring, it was always surprising, and also the variation of the outcome. Like, probably at first you think that's a quite reductive thing with these rules, and that it's like a restriction, but this kind of restriction as a formula led more to richdom, to variety, to so many possible ways how to deal with it. It's like a task. How can you solve this task, these restrictions? So I wanted to show you this just because this is really a strong reference to what we did. And then also part of the project is we asked the people to make a kind of contemporary remake of Workers Leaving the Factory. Of course, now not factories, since factories are not there so many anymore. So we called it Workers Leaving Their Workplace. And you have here in the menu, you can look it up at home if you're interested. Here's a tool where you can select some, for example, if you click here, right on the right, you will see all the remakes, contemporary remakes, like in India, Workers Leaving H&M factory, in Lisbon, a chewing gum factory. It's yeah, a whole variety, some miners even in Poland. So this was just a part of the project. Okay, shall we start with project giving some examples?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I just would like to elaborate the one aspect that you told, that no cuts are allowed. What does it mean? You said in some of your interviews, you and Harun, a film in 1960 had one cut every 12 seconds. A film today has one cut every 4 to 3 seconds. This means a 2-minute shot would have around 40 cuts usually. The editing, the cut, the montage is the main tool of a film of narration. So if you take away this possibility to narrate a story, how do you tell the story? And this was the content of their workshops. How to tell a story without using this main tool. And there are so many possibilities, which Antje will show you now.
So this is now mainly what interested us most is the camera work, how to solve this if you are not allowed to cut. So there are possibilities. You can, of course, you can move your camera. You can make a phantom image that you put the camera on something that drives and you make a traveling. You can zoom. You can do, there are a lot of operations you can do. And interesting, I found it very interesting. It's depending on where the participants came from. Like when they were more coming from photography, we had a lot of static shots, which has a kind of intensity. It's tempting within this project to have static shots. People who more were from cinema and film, they of course try to elaborate quite tricky things to let the camera move. And of course, as you might all know, zooming is usually out of question. You have a very, very good reason to zoom, because it's awkward most of the time. So, but even zooming is in a very, very interesting way present also in these examples. So I show you now some examples and tell you a little bit about the camera strategy and give a close description to, I wanted to find out this 2-minute format. If you try to describe it, that opens already up new questions. I start with a film that was shot in Bangalore from a group of 3 female participants. No, that's not true. No. I start with a film made by one participant, an artist from Chile, but we did this workshop in Rio de Janeiro. So this is an example of Rio de Janeiro. And the example is a static camera. In the foreground, sports and leisure activities. In the background, the bustling city. In between, we see a fisherman in a boat. The camera is static. The boat drifts completely out of frame. The fisherman is wearing a coat made out of plastic garbage sacks. Out of frame, he throws the net into the center of the image. The camera stays put. When retrieving his catch, he glides into the image again, and then he disappears. For me, this is one of my, I have to admit, one of my favorite films from the entire project. I love this piece. I would also show it in a gallery, really. I think it's really great. And this is also an example what was really great in this project. You can plan meticulously, but also you can walk the streets and just grab some watch. I mean, it's an eye-opener, our project, that what happened to all the people that suddenly you see everywhere some kind of work. So this was done while this participant just walked the streets and he saw this fisherman. And the complexity of the image, that you have these different layers of leisure, of work, and then the big city in the background, and the intelligence of the artist to not follow the fisherman and to not pan, but to stay, and then it's kind of wette, it's a a back, no, is it, yeah, a bet, that's what I mean. It's a bet, like, will he come back? Will he go out of the frame? So this is, again, very satisfying to watch. And hopefully this gives you already a sense of how complex 2 minutes without a cut can be. Would you like to add something?
Yes. This film is a masterwork. It's also a portrait of the city of Rio de Janeiro, because you have all these aspects of that mega city within one frame, within 2 minutes. The poverty, this traditional work of fishermen, and the modernity, the ceilings, the houses in the background, the skyscrapers, and the leisure in the foreground. And to bring this in one only frame is just amazing.
And maybe one can add this water as a cloac. I don't know what he's fishing there. That's.
I wouldn't eat it.
No. Okay. The next example I will give you is again static camera. It's always good to show you both two of a kind. That's from also Rio de Janeiro.
Certamente não foi o último.
We see a woman with a little girl on a playground. Everybody in Rio knows that a woman with white clothes and mostly darker skin is not the mother, but the nanny. The little girl climbs up the stairs of a slide and happily slips down. The nanny leads her to another bigger slide. After some hesitation, the girl slips into the off. We hear her crying out loud. The nanny lifts her arms in shock, as in a silent slapstick film, and runs into the off to fetch the girl. The camera stays put. Both re-enter the frame. The girl's appearance has changed. She has naked legs now, and her butt is full of dirty sand, which makes us laugh while she is still crying. The filmmaker's decision not to correct her framing while the accident happens has paid off. And what I like here especially is, of course, the humor. I mean, everybody who watches it has to laugh. You have to laugh. You can't help. And this reminds me so much, again, on the early film, like the early slapstick films where somebody, what's it called, with water thing, where somebody, steps, I was missing the word, steps on the garden watering, and then something happens. And so it's a kind of formula that I think it's by accident. She didn't thought, okay, I make an early slapstick film, it just happens. And again, like the other artists, it's just good that she did not move the camera. And this, as I said, pays off. Did you know that she's a nanny? Or, yeah, it's obvious, huh? Yeah. Therefore it's work, otherwise it wouldn't have been allowed. Would you like to add something?
Maybe the exhibitions which we were running and which we are still running, they are organized in cities, 15 cities, and then we have the installation workers are leaving the factory in 15 cities. It could also be organized according to professions. And one could be the nanny. I think there are 10 films about nannies. Yes. And this would be another possibility to organize the material.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about an archive. Of course, you have so many entries into it. Also, you could have a look what kind of professions, female, male, gender question. There are so many hard work, invisible work, intellectual work, and first of all, also what is missing. I don't tell you, you find out. So the next is from Bangalore. And now we have a moving camera with the zoom, but autonomous. At the beginning of the video, we see something spinning, which causes a psychedelic effect. The spinning stops, and we see hands taking laundry out of the machine. The camera tilts up, zooming back slightly, and we see two men at work. One man leaves with the dried laundry to the left. The other bends over the machine to fill it again. With the tilt up and zoom back, the field of vision is now opened up. We see several people doing the laundry. In the background are washing lines loaded with colorful clothes drying in the sun. The camera now zooms into the workers beating the laundry, while the man in the foreground continuously refills the drum. His presence in the frame maintains the connection to the first psychedelic image. The camera tilts down and zooms back into the spin dryer, but wider than at the beginning. We again see some circling laundry and how the laundryman activates the machine manually. Water pours out onto the floor, adding a variation to the starting frame. The video ends like it began, with a close-up of the psychedelically rotating laundry. So you can probably see that this is already not so easy to describe, because there is a lot of complex camera operations, not movement, but slide operations. And the trick was the timing with the filling of the machine, because it's not supposed to be longer than 2 minutes, as you know. But this guy must be very quick to refill the thing that you have the same ending as the beginning. So there were like 3 young filmmakers, and they went there, I think, like 5 times and tried it probably 20 times. And they liked most this example. So this is opposed to the first example I showed you. Sometimes you get something and you are happy after days walking through the streets, and this was more like a project. And I think one can see that it could be the beginning of a feature film about labor in Bangalore. I mean, it's so well filmed. We found it amazing.
And one important criteria for the quality of the films was the question: if the camera moves, if there is a zoom, is it really necessary? And if it is necessary, it's good. If it's not necessary, it's bad and it's taken out. And here it's zooming, it's showing the spinning wheel twice, but in a different way. At the end, you find out that it's manually done. At the end, you find out how it really works. So for me, this is a closed form of filming where each element is necessary for the whole. It's an artwork in the classic sense.
Yeah, and you don't find so many autonomous zooms, meaning if you zoom, but there is nothing in the image that motivates it. So if this guy would have gone in the back, then of course a lot also panning or zooming would be motivated by what's happening. But here the filmmakers made the decision, okay, we have to open up a little bit to see the beauty also of the scenery. But they did it so cleverly that it's not awkward at all. But we don't have so many examples of autonomous zooms or pans in this way. So maybe therefore another example of a pan which is clearly motivated now. This is in Cairo. Is not true because it says here Cairo, but we actually were in Cairo and Alexandria, and this is now Alexandria. It says Cairo, but it's wrong. A man is sitting on a chair looking at something in the off-screen that is very noisy. He sits there for quite a while doing nothing. As the camera follows him, because he is moving, he stands up, goes to a row of busy automatic sewing machines and fixes something with one flick of his fingers. The camera follows him back to a stool, but he doesn't sit on it. He leans against the wall and waits again. Another man joins him, also doing nothing. I mean, this is just wonderful because what a project like this also makes you very clear is that a lot of work is waiting. Working time is waiting time so often. And of course, the more industrialized we get, the more waiting of the human worker and the more activity of the machine. So this was such a nice little metaphor for this kind of semi-automatization. They're very old sewing machines, but they're already connected. It was a row, and so it was kind of advanced. And that then also the second guy comes and just stretches his hands because there's nothing to do. The machines do their work, but still eyes are needed to control and to do something small.
One of the targets of the whole project is to finally create a visual encyclopedia of labor in the 21st century. And I think if I watch, I know all the 450 films. Yeah, they are close to it. Maybe there are 200 more missing, but they are close to it. And this, to portray waiting and boredom, is very difficult. Portraying boredom without becoming boring is extremely difficult, also in novel writing. And he succeeded.
In this case, a she. Yeah, was a female young artist from Cairo. So this was a motivated pen, clearly, because the guy moves and the camera moves with him in order to observe what's going on. The next example would be a moving camera, but with an autonomous pen again, from Hanoi, actually a village near Hanoi. That's a mistake, of course. What's going on? No, it's the connection is not good anymore suddenly. But I have a plan B in this case.
Cho Ly đi đu quay nhé.
No, it's the resolution a problem. Let's see. Yes, it's.
Cháu chỉ cầm cơm nữa thôi, các anh biết cái gì làm. Cho Ly đi đu quay nhé. Đúng rồi nhé. Không cho anh lên đường hòng cho em anh đi đu quay đâu. Cứ bác cho ảnh chắc bác cho rồi cái ảnh xem ly nước nổ đẹp cực nhé. Bác bỏ ly nước nổ đẹp quá.
Sợ lên được, tớ lại không đi chơi.
Đã là tự đi chơi này.
Không, mà tớ đi tớ chơi rồi tớ.
Con giải nào? Đeo rồi giải. Ba ngồi chán.
giá rồi đây là quả trứng có trứng lên bây giờ
Con nào?
những cái già nó lại
Mấy con gai đè đấy.
con gặp vào bên đây
Đâu, thế này hái quả, một quả đâu.
nó vào nó ngoài nó chọn
Nó trong rồi.
Rồi gì kệ.
Làm nhé.
I think this was not the fine editing because I took it now from external hard drive, but doesn't matter. Close up on a 2 or 3 year old girl sewing the rim of a straw hat. The camera zooms in on the hat in order to observe it more closely. The hat looks almost bigger than the girl. The camera then pans to the left, revealing an older girl, obviously the sister, also working on a straw hat. The family is at home, so this must be homework. The camera pans further to the left, yet again without any trigger to the movement, and we see now both mother and father also working on straw hats. 2 small autonomous pans economically indicate the little girl's future. Which is, again, for me, astonishing that with 2 small pans you can reveal like decades if they are lucky and nothing happens in this village. It's a village, everybody does these hats and they produce not so many. It's really hard work to do this. And here also the sound is so important. You hear the chicken. And yeah, I think this is also a wonderful film. One should end a bit earlier. This was not the right version.
And I remember how you told me how the film was developed. This wasn't the very first shot that the filmmaker did. He described the situation, the manufacturing of straw hats, and he said, should I start with the grandfather and finish with the girl? Should I start with the mother, then going to the grandmother, then to the girl? Should I start with the girl, then to the grandfather? And so he made, I think, 5 or 6 different versions till finally he decided, in discussing with you, to take this solution, because the way you saw it now is you have the whole future life of that little girl within 2 minutes. This is his future life. It's just described. It will sew straw hats within her family manufacturing.
Yeah, so probably you already realized when we explained this project, we could always talk about film and filmic strategies, dramaturgies, camera work, or about the topic of labor. So I don't know which is more interesting for you. Maybe we can start the Q&A. Then.
Please wait for the mic. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, it's a nice segue because that's what I was curious about in terms of the workshops, what the conversations were like in the different workshops. Were they more about kind of technical aspects of how video language works and how you describe things, or about labor, conversations about labor conditions and things like that, or what kinds of relationship between these 2 themes were present in the workshop themselves?
I think mostly there were 2 phases. The first phase was to collect possible topics. We always asked about the city. The 20 up to 25 participants, of course, knew much more about the city than we did. So we created some brainstorming lists of topics, and there this was very, very much labor related. We discussed, does it make sense at all to do this when they presented some ideas? And Harun was always very keen that they do research, but they mostly didn't. And so therefore you find a lot of street situations, like also folkloristic, because it's very easy to go and find interesting stuff, but you don't have call centers or where you need access. And so in this phase, it was more about the question of labor, what is there, what is not there, what's the problem. And then when they started to bring the first examples, sometimes after the first meeting day, there were next day already first attempts. Then it was more about the filmic, how can you improve it or not, or is it already perfect? And that was quite intense, and always with the entire group. We did not make single like one-to-one, because this process was very, very important for the entire project. Otherwise, nobody would learn anything.
I'm interested in how you described at the beginning that you have your web archive, and you, of course, have gone into the archive now and picked certain examples to show us the process that was at work in working on the film. But you also mentioned that you had exhibitions of the material around the world, which is then the curatorial work. Could you give some examples of how an exhibition then would be created and go into the three-dimensional space from the digital archive?
Mm-hmm. I think until now we almost made 10 exhibitions, including also some just projections on outside walls of the Goethe Institute in Montreal, so where I didn't even went, but it's also an exhibition. And of course, it's very much related to the conditions you find the exhibition space, of course. So the exhibitions in detail changed. Every exhibition is another one, but the concept is quite simple. It's now that we have 15 cities, it's one screen or one monitor is one city, and we select 6 examples per city that in order that you can compare and that you have a kind of complexity, but you can still, as an audience, you can still find your time to watch it all. That was for me very important. I don't like to exhibit archives where nobody's able to process it because it's so much. So therefore and then of course we try to find the best 6 films, which is not so easy, sometimes painful, because sometimes there are clearly probably 12 best films, and then it's a kind of composition. Of course you start to compose then, and you can never represent a city. I think that's clear for everybody. This is just a slight focus. It tells you something about the city, but also about the condition of the people we worked with. So it's just, you have this double reality when you make exhibitions like this. And yeah, maybe because you were so much involved in Boston, maybe you can say something about the Boston exhibition?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the workshops in Boston and 3 months later in Mexico. And I would say that the quality of the films is as such that you could do 2 or 3 exhibitions with 2 or 3 different loops, each 6 films, at least 2. Also your selection must have been very painful. The reason is just when you announce a workshop with Harun Farocki and Antje Ehmann, then you get 90 applications in the US, by the way, also from Canada. And we got 90 applications. And from these were already people who were deep into experimental film, avant-garde film, they knew who it is. And those, they had to send an example of their video work. And so I spent some weekends looking all these examples and then trying to find out the best. But from these 90s, we took the 25 best. And they were really good. I mean, there were some additional criteria. We didn't want to have just 25, 19 years old college students. No, there should be several ethnies. There should be men and women, of course. Genders should be mixed. And we also wanted to have some elder, senior filmmakers included, because it's always good for the group dynamic. So, but they all had to be very good. And so the results were in Boston. I'm a Bostonian, but they were amazing. They were just great. And they came from Atlanta, from New York, from Harvard, from MIT, from Boston University, from Montreal, from Seattle. One came with a bus from Seattle and made these films. And yeah, also, no, I have to be short.
We have, yeah, one more question.
Hey, you just started touching on this, but I'm just curious because a lot of the labor that's shown brings up ideas about class and race, about whose gaze is this being filmed by? Is it folks that are sort of close to these, ideas of what's kind of like lower income labor, or is it more privileged folks that are filming this, and like what the connection there is between the viewer and the filmmaker?
I mean, this was mainly up to the attitude of the participants, how they deal with these questions, but there are some really interesting, we don't have enough time now to show you more, but there are some examples where there's an ethical dimension in the way they approached people and filmed people while working, some strange close-up that some simple worker was reacting to the camera presence in watching directly into the camera in a very it's a very intense thing, because usually in film you know that rule number one is never watched into the camera, but he did this, exactly this, and this was kind like to ask back, so why are you filming me? Or another example from Tel Aviv, there was clearly a black black African guy from Ghana, I guess, cleaning on a Sabbath in Tel Aviv, cleaning work. And the artist filmed him, but in the end he asked, what's your name, where are you from? And this simple act to ask, what's your name, where are you from, made it human again, kind of. I don't know if I'm exaggerating now, but for me, I had a strong feeling that people should get their names or should have a voice, but we would never tell the participants, please think about this. I mean, this is part of the process and it happens, or if it not happens, or if it's bad, of course we said something. But I don't know if this is an answer to your question.
Thank you so very much, Antje. Detlef, you want to add something? Detlef?
I think it's something that filmmakers can learn from Harun's way of filmmaking. Whatever he did, he always respected the people he was portraying. He deeply respected them. He never humiliated somebody. So within the whole project, I think people were asking us, do you show alienated work? And this is actually not a question. Alienation and work, labor is shown. And it can be weight work, it can be simple work, manual work, but it's just shown as it is. And this is somehow the attitude of Antje and Harun. By the way, Einstellung in German has two significations, two meanings. One is a shot and the other is attitude. So one target of the workshops was to develop an attitude to what the video artists were filming. And there you were great.
Thank you so very much
Thank you.
for this amazing night. Thank you. Just like Paul mentioned, the exhibition is still on view until 8 p.m. if you would like to see it. Thank you so very much for coming tonight.